Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Education Business Meeting. Today is Tuesday, February 6th. The time is now 7:01. With me this evening, I have board members Howard White, Ashley Goulias, Kara Bakey, Sherry McCready Pritchard, Mary Ellen Flaherty, Colin Hostin, and virtually Samantha Pleasant. We also have in chambers Dr. Alexandra Estrella and her cabinet. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone to please sign the sheet of paper. If you're going to speak this evening publicly, it should be on the table up front, and we will be collecting it within 5 minutes. Thank you. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and for this evening's spotlight, I'm going to transfer the meeting to Kara Bakey.
Thank you, Chairperson Carpio. This evening, we have 2 spotlights. The first one is Black History Month, February 2024. The Norwalk Board of Education is proud to recognize Black History Month in Norwalk Public Schools. Throughout the month, members of our community, schools, educators, and students are encouraged to honor the accomplishments of Black Americans and their important contributions throughout history. On February 29th, NPS will host the 2nd annual district-wide Black History and Heritage Festival at Brian McMahon High School. The district will follow the national theme of African Americans, the Arts, and celebrate the many impacts that Black Americans have had on visual arts, music, cultural movements, and more. We invite everyone to come see performances and presentations by our students that highlight the incredible and inspiring contributions made by Black Americans. In the 1920s, historian Dr. Carter G. Woodson, in the organization he founded, raised awareness of the contributions of Black Americans. The celebration was held in February to coincide with the birthdays of President Abraham Lincoln and abolitionist Frederick Douglass. The observance was expanded in 1976 to a month-long celebration as part of the nation's bicentennial. Since then, every U.S. president has officially designated the month of February as Black History Month. Every year, NPS classrooms across the district highlight Black History Month by learning about historical figures, inventors, educators, and civil rights leaders. Educators highlight books written by Black American authors and poets and incorporate videos and other resources into everyday lessons. Students discuss subjects such as school integration and civil rights, landmark legal decisions, and the role of Black Americans in military history. By declaring February Black History Month, the Board of Education encourages all schools to share in activities and celebrations honoring generations of Black Americans who have positively influenced our community and country. And our second spotlight, Norwalk Board of Education celebrates National School Counseling Week. The Norwalk Board of Education is proud to celebrate National School Counseling Week from February 5th to February 9th. This year's theme is School Counseling, Standards-Based, Student-Focused. In the spirit of this year's theme, Norwalk Public Schools wants to focus our attention on the unique contribution of the school counselors in our schools, K through 12. Our scholars are positively impacted as a result of everything our school counselors do each and every day. School counselors are master's level trained and licensed educators equipped with the skills, knowledge, and expertise to support and develop students' academic, career, and social emotional well-being. They are compassionate people who focus on others, often above themselves. They are problem solvers who think outside of the box for scholar-oriented solutions. School scholars work very hard for their scholars and families and often take their work home with them in both their hearts and their minds. Here are a few words to describe our amazing school counseling teams. Compassionate, encouraging, insightful, mentor, and resourceful. A quote, A good school counselor can change a class. A great school counselor will change a life, is something we see from our school counselors. On behalf of the Newark Board of Education, we thank you all so much for all that you do for our scholars and their families.
Carol, do you want to come up with some of our counselors that are here representing our team?
So this evening we have with us, go back over here. This evening we have with us Bobby from Kendall and Career Academy, and we just thank our counselors for their tireless efforts, K-12. We thank them for who they are. We thank them for being everything to everybody. Just ask our scholars, ask our families, and they will tell you amazing stories about our school counselors. We couldn't do it without them, and we're so, so thankful, so we thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Kara. And I forgot, before we move into public comments, if there's anyone online that would like to speak, please raise your hand now. And I'm going to transfer the meeting over to Sherry McCready-Pritchard.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Before we begin the public comment portion of our meeting, I'd like to outline a few important guidelines to ensure a smooth and respectful dialogue. First, each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes for their comment. We kindly ask you to adhere to this time limit to allow everyone an opportunity to speak. When it's your turn, please start by stating your name and address. This is important for our records and helps us follow up on any concerns or suggestions you may have. We welcome your thoughts, feedback, and constructive criticism regarding the matters at hand. However, we ask that you maintain a respectful tone throughout your remarks. We ask that you refrain from inappropriate statements, including but not limited to personal attacks, profane language, and threatening statements or behavior. If the chair determines that a comment or action is inappropriate, we may conclude the public comment portion of tonight's meeting at this time. For those participating online, the same rules apply. Please ensure your comments are concise and respectful. When it's your turn, you will be unmuted, and we ask you to follow the same protocol of stating your name and address before proceeding with your comment. Please make sure to virtually raise your hand at the beginning of the meeting before public comments begin to participate. We are here to listen and constructively consider all viewpoints. Let's work together to make this a productive and positive experience for our community. Thank you for your cooperation and understanding. Let's proceed with the first comment. I have Makina Testa.
My name is McKenna Tessa. I live at 266 Foxford Road, Unit A in Norwalk. I'm a 7th grader at CMS, K-8. I've been with Mr. T at CMS since kindergarten. Since Mr. T left more than 2 months ago, things have not been the same. I've always felt safe knowing Mr. T was in the building. I always knew that Mr. T would be there to take care of us. Now that has changed. Mr. T is not just a principal that sits in his office all day. Mr. T reads books to us in his book nook. He dresses up and takes part in all of our celebrations, and he even goes on field trips with us. CMS is a special school. We are different than the rest of the schools. Mr. T helps to keep all the traditions alive and keep the meaning of our school growing. Mr. T makes everyone feel welcome no matter their race, gender, or culture. He always does what is best for the school and makes everyone included with their support I've gotten from the teachers and Mr. T. I'm brave enough to stand here tonight to ask you to please bring Mr. T back home where he belongs. We all need him back very soon.
Thank you. Is Gianna here?
My name is Gianna Tesla. I live at 266 Claxville Road, Unit A in Norwalk. I'm currently a freshman at Norwalk High. I graduated CMS last year after being there since kindergarten. While at CMS, I learned that I can always be myself and would always be accepted. The educators and students at CMS helped me to break out of my shell and go out of my comfort zone, which has helped me in my success at my first half-year freshman year. Mr. T leads with pride, passion, and joy, and he is the reason why I have enough courage to be standing in front of you all today. Mr. T has always led by example and has always done what's best for his students without even thinking about himself. He is wonderful to all of the staff, and he is the greatest role model students will have in their life. He always puts everyone first, no matter what. To me, Mr. T has always been more than just my principal. I consider him a part of my family, and he treats me like I'm a part of his as well, by showing me he will always be there for me even if I did graduate. He will always welcome me back with open arms. Please put Mr. T back where he belongs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, you have Mary Wilkie.
Good evening, Mary Jordan, 9 Mott Avenue, on behalf of the Norwalk Federation of Teachers. We have known Mr. Thomas for a long time. We've known him to be a skilled administrator and an effective leader, even if we have sometimes disagreed. We teachers experience a harsh climate that features too many unilateral directives from central office, too many gotchas, lengthy investigations, and sometimes snap judgments. I'm here tonight to share concerns about the lack of policy and inconsistent procedures when dealing with employee disciplinary concerns. We need to believe that a fair system exists so we can focus on our students and their needs. Too often, we don't experience a system that features a timely conclusion of investigations and administrative leaves. There are too many harsh outcomes in this district. Lengthy investigations can be punitive in and of themselves. Talking with my members, many express a sense of fear in this environment and that the union is our only safe voice. We urge you, as a board, to lead the way to a systematic, fair, and timely process to gather facts, to identify an appropriate and reasonable response, and include a sensible communication strategy for employees. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Lynn Moore. I live at 813 Larkspur Drive, Norwalk, Connecticut. I'm speaking to you as president of the Norwalk Association of School Administrators. My NASA member, Madar Thomas, has been on leave since November 29th. He was not interviewed by a lawyer or lawyers from the district's firm until January 18th, 2024. Madar has been out for 10 weeks, basically a whole quarter. It is unfortunate that union members must come before the public and the Board of Education to share employee matters. We work for the Board of Education. We are your employees. You, as the Board of Ed, you delegate the work to the superintendent. I urge you, as the Board of Education, to be certain that you have the appropriate policies in place such that no employee, union or unaffiliated, would ever need to be in the predicament that Madar Thomas is in right now, Actually, we don't even know what Medard is facing. From our contract, Article 10, protection, it is recognized that inquiries, investigations need to be made when there are allegations or complaints. The individual concerned will be given full information, including the identity of the complainants, in sufficient time to prepare his or her defense. I contend that we were never given sufficient time to prepare, as we were unaware of the scope of information until January 18th at the interview with the district's lawyers. The district's officials, Ms. Fayos, Mr. Bray, they appeared at the school on November 29th without warning and without contacting me as Medard's union representative. Later, Mr. Bray contacted me because Medard asked him to do so. The letter to put Mr. Thomas on leave had already been prepared and was presented on November 29th. Further in the contract, it states that no conclusion will be reached or decisions made, however, until after the staff member has had full opportunities to defend himself and herself. We have a right under our contract to know and to be represented. I urge the BOE members, as representatives of the public, to be certain that the contracts which are with the Board of Ed, we don't have contracts with individuals in the headquarters here, but our contracts are with the Board of Ed. Please be certain that those contracts are adhered to. Thank you for your time.
I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Okay. Growth here. Good evening, Colin Growth here, 11 Bonniebrook Road, here in the, dark. 1 second. I sent a letter to my wife and I sent a letter to the board members and a few other administrators about a week ago, and I just came to read that and make some additional comments. There's a little bit of backstory on that just has to do with my family's personal history with the Norwalk public school system and our transition to CMS, but this is a letter in support of Medard Thomas. We're writing as concerned parents of 2 children at Concord Magnet School in support of Principal Medard Thomas. We've lived in Norwalk for over 20 years and absolutely love this city so much. Then when it came time for us to purchase a home and start a family, we chose Norwalk above many communities in the area. We love the diversity, the neighborhoods, the suburban feel, while also having all the benefits and conveniences of living in a city. When it was our time to send our oldest to kindergarten, we investigated several options, but we were actually excited to choose our neighborhood school. At this time, this was Tracy Magnet School. When we entered Tracy, there was no denying the positivity. There was an upward momentum created by a principal who had so much enthusiasm, intelligence, and a genuine vested interest in the kids. Under Principal Rangel's direction, Tracy had just achieved magnet status and garnered national recognition as a blue ribbon school for its character education program. And we could walk there. We had a year and a half, we had half a year before COVID hit, but we were constantly impressed by how things were handled before and during the pandemic. Then, under the watch of Superintendent Estrella, both Principal Rangel and Vice Principal Carla Montero Walsh abruptly left, and for the next 3 years that our kids were in attendance there, we saw the school operate in a constant state of upheaval with very little direction and a notable lack of focus. Last year, our family moved across town to West Norwalk. In doing so, decided we would move our children to a school closer to our new home. We applied to Concord Magnet and were delighted when we received our acceptance. We had a friend based there and had heard wonderful things throughout the years about the community and well-established program, a Norwalk institution for 50 years. Our kids started 2nd and 4th grades respectively in the fall and were met with open arms by Principal Thomas, who had already been there for 8 years. We cannot say enough good things about him. He knew our kids by name even before they started and continually made them feel safe, happy, and respected throughout the fall. What could have been a difficult transition from one elementary school to another was an easy one due in large part to Principal Thomas and the community that he fosters. So please imagine our shock and dismay when the unthinkable happened 3 months after we transitioned to a new school. Our administration was yet again yanked from under us, yet again under the watch of Superintendent Estrella. Several cryptic emails, and 3 months later, our children have been put back into the situation by NPS where they were without proper stability. If you need a testimonial to Mr. T, please consider this one from our family of 4. We're imploring that you reinstate him at CMS immediately. Our kids were only 3 months at CMS before he was put on administrative leave and miss him terribly. We witnessed previously at Tracy, morale focus.
Sorry, time is up, my friend.
Okay,
Sorry.
no problem.
Are there any other online comments that I'm?
Comment, and Kelly, I'm just gonna unmute you. Kelly, if you could start, please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kelly McKenna from Tenniel Lives Road in Norwalk. I have 2 children in the 3rd and 5th grade at Concord Magnet School. I'm here to follow up on my previous communications regarding the absence of Principal Medard Thomas from CMS. It has now been 62 days since he was put on leave on November 29th, and the school community continues to feel the impact of his absence profoundly. As each day passes without clarity or resolution, the concern among students, parents, and teachers only intensifies. Principal Thomas's absence leaves a noticeable void at the school, affecting morale, stability, and the overall learning environment. I reiterate my urgent appeal for transparency and prompt action from the superintendent and the Board of Education. While I understand the need for investigations, the prolonged uncertainty surrounding Principal Thomas's leave is detrimental to the well-being and academic progress of our children. I implore you to prioritize the best interests of the CMS community by actively working towards Principal Thomas's return. His positive influence, personal connection with the students, and exemplary leadership are irreplaceable assets to our school. Thank you.
Do we have any more? I guess that's it. Okay, so thank you everyone for speaking. That is the conclusion of public comments. Any email comments will be included in the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Next item on the agenda is the superintendent report.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good evening, everyone. We have 2 factors that we want to talk about today in terms of the work that's happening throughout the leadership of the district. Originally, we were going to talk about school-based health centers, but we're going to move that to March because we want to make sure Ms. Fayos is here to speak on that matter. I want to start off by talking about our MOI data. So we have Diane Fajardo here with us today to speak of this work and to also highlight some great things that are happening across many of our schools that merit celebration. Ms. Fajardo.
Good evening, Dr. Stray and the Board of Education. The end of August, we finished our winter term of NWEA. We tested students, 95% of our students in grades K through 10 in mathematics, and grades 3 through 10 in reading. I want to start with just a little refresher about what NWEA is and talk about the measures of academic progress. NWEA was formed in the 1970s, and it's used by over 8,500 schools and districts across the United States. So what does MAP measure? Mathematics and reading. And we get results overall by students and also in the instructional areas that you see below listed. And how are these results reported? They're reported on a continuous scale across grades. The student gets a rich score, and it measures and compares academic growth, and it has the ability to compare scores at various times throughout the student's education due to that rich scale. And what the rich scale measures is an estimate of the instructional level. So this is not a test of mastery, but what students are ready to learn, what instruction they need next. So at this time of the year, mid-year, these results are very important at the school level, because now if they see a student or group of students that's not progressing based upon NWEA norms, which we'll talk about, adjustments are made to instruction. So I mentioned normative data, and this really brings context to the data. There's two types of norms: achievement norms, and for every student gets a grade level percentile associated with their RIT score. Then there's also growth norms, and once a student tests, they get a growth projection based on their grade, their starting score, and instructional time. So this is really one of the strengths of NWEA, this national norming that's done approximately every 5 years. So norms are used to evaluate achievement and growth relative to peers nationwide. So we're going to start by looking at achievement levels, grades, through grade 10. And this table shows you the levels that are reported on NWEA. And there's a percentile range associated with each level. And right now, we are carefully monitoring that blue level, the above 60th. We are really tracking what percent of our students reach that high level. And likewise, we're looking at also students at the low level. What can we do to support those students to move them out of that level? So we're looking math through reading and reading. We're comparing fall 2023 to winter 2024 based upon those levels and the numbers in the bars that are color-coded to the level and represent the percent of our students at each one of the levels. So starting with math, looking at the high level, the blue part of the bars, you see that between fall of 2023 and winter of 2024, there was a 5.3 percentage point gain in the percent of our students. It went from 34% to 39.3%. So we had a bump up in the percent of students above the 60th percentile in achievement. Likewise, if you look at the red, the bottom, you see there was a decline of 3.2 percentage points in the percent of students in that low range. Those are students that had a percentile between 1 and 20. Now, on the right side of the graph, we see reading. We saw a smaller gain of just about 1 percentage point between fall and winter in the percent of students above the 60th. And we saw a slight increase at the lower level. But really that's less than 1 percentage point, so it was relatively flat. So we're looking here across grades K through 10. But we wanted to look at a subset of students. This is the same graph again, but now we're looking at students through grade 8. Because students through grade 8, they actually have school improvement teachers. And we wanted to see what the trends look like here. In mathematics, we saw an even larger increase, over 6 percentage points in the percent of students above the 60th percentile. And we also saw a larger decline more than 4 percentage points in the percent of students that were in the low performing area. In reading, we did see a small gain, but a gain nonetheless, from 37 to 38.4%. And there was a very slight decline in the lower level. So clearly, we've seen more growth, more change in mathematics, but we are also seeing it in reading, and more so in grades K through 8, where we do have our improvement teachers.
So can I just interject a little bit in that area? One of the things that you will see throughout the conversation tonight is that obviously K-8 has shown significant growth relative to 9 to 12. And I think I want to preface what you just said, the importance of our interventionists and coaches at the school and the impact that that's having in terms of student outcomes, because particularly at the high school level, when we don't have those structures in place, we see how the growth is not as substantive as in the lower grades. Also, I think it's important to note that when we look at the interventions that are happening at the lower levels, they don't necessarily happen at the same rate in 9 and 10, because those interventionists are not there. And we are thinking about how we reshape the program, particularly for those students that are coming in with formal interrupted education or have experienced limited education in their former country, so that they have the supports that they need, similar to what we provide in the earlier grades in terms of learning how to read and apply those fundamental skills that are critical and essential. And I think the tier that I want to add is the SRBI work that is also happening, that wasn't happening in the K-8 continuum in the past, that also inform how to better, more effectively support students.
May I just ask for a slight correction on that? When you're looking at when you're looking at high school for that, would you just narrow your range to multi-language learners that are coming new to the school, or would you be looking at the whole?
We look at the whole gamut.
The whole high school?
Mm-hmm.
And those that are in some way?
Correct, and when you look at the gamut, the achievement for students overall in 9 to 12 is not as significant as it is in K-8. But we don't have the same intervention structures in the upper tier as we do in K-8.
I see.
In the upper grades. So.
That exposes that in a good way.
Correct.
We're going to take a look at who we tested, the demographics of our test takers in the fall versus the winter. And you can see, for the most part, there was very little difference in the percent by subgroup that were tested, except when you look at our MLL students. There was almost a 12% increase in the number of MLL students that were tested in the winter. And if you dig a little deeper, you would find out that almost 27% of the MLL students were newly arrived students that tested. So we need to keep that in mind also when we're looking at the results of our MLL subgroup. In the fall of 2023, it was under 22% newly arrived. So that essentially was the biggest change in the demographic picture of who our test takers were. And we did add, the other difference is in mathematics, we added grade K through 10 in the winter. In the fall, we tested 1 through 10. We don't test kindergarten students in the fall. So now we're going to just dig a little deeper, looking at that group, that level of, that we saw in the graph, the blue level percent of students above the 60th percentile, and comparing fall percentages to winter percentages. And you can see overall, the gain is about a 16% increase overall. Our MLLs actually had the largest gain, although they have the smallest percent, but the largest gain between fall and winter from 9.1% up to 12.7, which is about a 33% increase in the percent of students who are reaching the high achievement area. And this, again, you know, we need to consider the mix that we saw initially of our test takers. Now, on the flip side, we're going to look at our lowest achieving band. Again, we're sticking with math. We saw in mathematics almost a 12% decrease in the students in the lower levels between fall and winter. And that decrease truly carried over into all of our subgroups. Now we'll take a look at reading. We're going to go down to the 60th percentile, the high performing. Our change overall was a rise of about 2%, so relatively flat, but an increase nonetheless. And you can see that for the most part, results were relatively stable with the percentages of subgroups if you compare fall to winter. So we saw just a modest increase carrying over into our subgroups. At the 21st percentile, we did see, again, a small decline. No, actually a small increase, up less than 1%, from 21.1 to 21.6. If you look at some of our subgroups, for instance, our Black subgroup, there was an increase from 20.4% up to 22.8%. But relatively flat, as is the overall. Any questions? Now we spoke, yes.
Diane, I understand the numbers here. We said we tested 95% of our students, and that's based on basically who was present that day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm curious, well, the second part is from fall to winter, do we have one-to-one like longitudinal data, or is it just sort of overall?
Well, that's, when we talk about growth,
yeah,
which is going to be the next part,
okay.
This is just achievement, and we're looking at all students that sat and tested, right? But now when we look at growth, we're going to be looking at matched students. So for mathematics, we'll look grades 1 to 10,
right.
And for reading, 3 to 10.
Okay.
Okay? So, a good measure of growth. We mentioned before that every time a student tests, they get a RIT score, and what accompanies that is also a percentile and a projection of how much, based upon the norming study, that student is expected to grow, in our case, from fall to winter. The growth study takes into account the weeks of instruction, the beginning level of the student, and that's where we have match scores. So we're looking now in mathematics, we're looking at the percent of students that met their projected growth fall to winter, and we're comparing those percents for the 2022-23 school year to this current school year. And if you start all the way on the right, you can see that last year, almost 54% of our students met the fall to winter projected growth, but now, the current fall to winter year, almost 62%. So that is a huge difference. And in this case, we're using about 7,700 students, just the matched students in this study. Typically, nationally, the norm is for half of the students, 50%, to meet their projected growth. So clearly, we are way above it in mathematics this year. And you can see again the result by subgroup. Now, this is the same graph. We're looking now about 6,000 students that were met with matched scores, fall to winter for reading. And you can see that there is a slight bump up from last year where we were at 51.6% of students meeting projected growth. Now we're at 52.7%. Nationally, 50% is the norm. Again, you see by subgroup the comparison of last year to this year in growth. So there's a set of norms associated with achievement and another set of norms, which we call the conditional growth norms, associated with growth.
Excuse me, can you explain again, how are we projecting what we're expecting, how much growth?
What happens when a student has a RIT score, they are projected based upon the norming studies conducted by NWEA, looking at that student's peers nationally. They're looking at the weeks of instruction between fall and winter. They're looking obviously at the content area. They're looking at the grade of the student. And based upon how that norming sample made gains or growth, that's what we're being compared to. So it's a national sample. And this sampling is done every 5 years, which is really incredible because of the cost associated with such a studies. But NWEA has done this consistently.
Would you happen to know what's the percentage of students that started the test that did not complete the assignment?
Okay, if a student did not complete the assignment, they would not be in the study, because we only have students that hit submit. If a student started and never hit submit, this is all online, it's computer adapted, then that student would not be counted in the study.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
It's Diane. This is like a view from above. When you say the national norm for growth is 50%, and clearly in the math we've gone over that, which is wonderful, and slightly in reading, but it just seems to me that 50% would be a low amount.
If you think of the bell-shaped curve,
yes,
the norming study.
Help me look at this and get the depth of the meaning here. Why would 50% be really, beyond 50% would be good? It seems low to me.
50% is typical growth and typical achievement based upon NWEA's norming studies. Does that make sense?
So it's not performance, it's growth.
Yeah, it's the growth, yes, I understand that part. So that's a positive, you want growth, it's not just a high grade.
We as a district have been focusing on in terms of achievement now, not growth, but achievement, on students that are above the 60th percentile.
Yes,
why is
that's one of our.
Why is that? Because there are also linking studies that are done with state assessments to see what is the prediction based upon NWEA for proficiency on our state test.
Yes.
And we've seen, there's at each grade level, there's a certain achievement level or achievement percentile that would give you a good chance of saying you're going to be proficient on the state test. But overall, if you wanted one reasonable percentage to really try to reach, and that's the 60th percentile, it more or less covers grades 3 through 8. Any other questions? So now we're going to talk about conditional growth percentile. And we're going to look at this table, and it's color coded, one from reading, we'll start with the reading one, and you see grades 3 through 10, and we're comparing the conditional growth of all the students, fall to winter, 2022, 2023, to fall to winter this year. So you see let's look grade 4 students in the blue. Their conditional growth, fall to winter last year, was at the 47th percentile. This year in grade 5, they dipped to the 39th percentile. But look at grade 6. Last year, the growth was stronger in grade 6 than it was in grade 4. It was at the 67th percentile. This year, it's almost at the 80th percentile. So you can see orange to orange, it's color-coded as the cohort moves from one grade to the next.
This is district-wide.
Correct. The reading is looking at matched students in grades 3 through 10. The math is looking at matched students grades 1 through 10, because we don't test kindergarten in the fall. Now, which is really amazing and a real celebration is look at the math column, fall 2023 to fall 2024. In all but one grade, our students grew at the 90th conditional growth percentile or higher in all the grades if you look down that column. And if you match, you can see in almost every case they made progress. Look at grades moving from 7 to 8. They were at the 58th percentile in growth from fall to winter last year. And now, as in grade 8, they grew to 96th percentile fall to winter. We're going to look at this in a different way. Do you have any questions before we move on? Yes.
There's just a couple outliers here. I don't know if we've dug a little deeper into, for example, grade 9 reading.
Mm-hmm.
Is that 12 typo?
No, that's accurate. And I think one of the things that we've been talking about, besides not having interventionists at that level, is also testing fidelity by students, because a lot of studies show the older the students get, if there's no direct accountability to their academic performance in terms of their grades, they don't tend to take the assessment as seriously. So we're wondering also if this is a byproduct of students not sitting and taking the assessment in the same manner that they would a content-based assessment for a course. So we need to further analyze if it's a byproduct of like the content that's happening in English, or if it's a byproduct of students not really taking the assessment seriously and as a result not scoring well. And as somebody that has high school students, if they don't think the assessment is of value, they express that they don't take it as seriously as they should, so that we have a good analysis of where they truly are.
This looks like just drop off a cliff. It doesn't make sense at all, particularly the very same students are taking their math and they're growing, we don't see what the 10th grade is doing in 11th grade, but still they're 87, and over here is 16. It doesn't look like they were taking the test in a serious way.
In the lower grades though, like because there's the grade 4 to grade 5, the blue numbers, there's a dip for both reading and math. What can we look at this data as telling us about, or is this something we should be looking at, like specifically 4th grade curriculum leading into 5th grade?
We will be looking at that,
like
based on the findings. We have to look at curricula, we have to look at instruction, and also we have to look at where do we have cycles of school of improvement and at what grade bands. that might be a grade band that we didn't like really focus on. I know third grade was one that in many schools was prioritized. And fourth grade, it was one of the grades also, when you think about the pandemic, hit the hardest because those were the kids that came into school when they were supposed to be learning to read and really didn't have that in-school experience of going through that process. So that could also be a factor. So there's a number of variables that we have to further examine to see what's leading to that.
I think we'll get a clearer picture of this when we measure fall to spring, because at that point, our curriculum will, for the most part, have been taught too, because there may be items that the student is encountering that maybe they haven't been taught yet. So when we talked about the instructional areas, a classroom teacher can go on the NWEA portal and not only see the RIT score and percentile overall with the test results, but by instructional area. That can shed light on why the scoring is the way it is. We're going to look at this information in a different way. We see the levels across the top. We're looking again, math falls to winter for all students that had matched scores 2022-23 to our current 2023-24. And if you look at this picture, you can see that last year, the conditional growth percentile, fall to winter, was in that average, that orange range right in the middle. And you can see exactly what that conditional growth percentile was by grade. Now, if you flip over to the right side, to the right table, you can see, with the exception of one grade, all of the conditional growth percentiles are above, or at 90 or above. And in many cases, they're at 99. So that's quite a shift in the amount of growth in mathematics that we saw last year in comparison to this year. And here's our table for reading. And you see those, as I mentioned, those grade 10 outliers are consistent for 2 years. But we do see a slight shift towards high average, which is above the 60th percentile conditional growth in comparison to last year. So it really mirrors what we're seeing in achievement. If a student exceeds the projected growth, their percentile, their achievement percentile goes up. If in fact they meet their projected growth, their percentile stays the same. If they do not meet their projected growth, their achievement percentile declines. So we wanted to take a look at the MLL group. Here again, we're looking at math. We're beginning with math. And we're really looking at matched students this year. About 1,700 students had matched scores. And 7 grades you see this year had a conditional growth percentile above 80, the blue. Last year, there were 4. So our MLLs in mathematics are low. Here's MLLs in reading. Remember when we spoke about MLLs earlier, we said we have a higher percent this year fall to winter testing than we did last year of newly arrived MLLs. Special education students. Okay, last year, fall to winter, at 4 grades were in that high level of growth. Now we have 8 grades and a high level of growth. Finally, we're looking at reading for our special education students. And we see it really is mixed. but we do see grades 3 and 4 very promising, we've got a high average in the grade. So this gives you a sense of how important it is this time of year for teachers who can drill down into this data, into their classroom data, and help them form groups within their classroom and differentiate instruction based upon the results. Of course, they're not only going to use this results, but this is one measure that they can use to triangulate.
You mentioned the teachers. How, have we surveyed the teachers for their opinions on NWEA NWEA and how they feel about the students taking it, what the teachers think about the data that they're getting back from it? How many years have we been doing this assessment?
We've been doing this, we actually started in 2017.
Okay.
And then we stopped as the pandemic hit. And we began again in 2021.
Okay. And
I can tell you that instructional, our ILTs, instructional leadership teams, our coaches use this extensively.
I understand the use of the data, I'm just wondering how the teachers themselves
As
feel
far as
about
the
it
survey, no, we have not surveyed.
being implemented.
Any other questions?
When you say implemented, do you mean using it as a resource for instructional planning or?
I think our teachers seeing this as data that they can use, not just at the instructional leadership level, but our teachers seeing this data and our teachers looking at this assessment and feeling like it really is accurately assessing the kids. I have a lot of opinions about standardized tests. And I'm interested in whether the teachers give it to the students feeling like this is really going to effectively give us some data, or if they don't necessarily feel that it's the most effective way to get data about our students.
I think that this is one data point in time, and this is more to get a broad scope of where we are with national norming in play. I don't think that this is the tool that teachers will use to engage in day-to-day planning. We use other measures to engage in that kind of practice, but this does allow us to see overarchingly where our strengths and areas of development and growth are, to then utilize for professional planning around certain standards and indicators that need to be further addressed. Because of the nature of this assessment and because it's what's the word again?
Computer adaptive.
Because it's adaptive, the item bank is not one that, the question bank is not one that the teachers necessarily have access to really do that type of analysis. Okay. The end of unit assessments and all the pre and post assessments are better metrics that teachers use to do that day-to-day planning and revision. And this is a great ILT tool. I think the other unit assessments are tools for instructional shifts. Even though this is also helpful in seeing broader picture and more individualized student need, because it really gives you a deep analysis of where the gaps are within different standards and bands as well.
How much instructional time is taken to get these assessments completed throughout the year?
It's an untimed test, typically 40 minutes elementary, and usually 60 to 80 minutes middle school.
3 times a year we do it?
Correct.
Diane, when you look at these scores on an overview, would you say that our math program is really quite strong because it seems to be affecting high growth, and that we would look more carefully at the reading program?
I'm really not the one to ask for curriculum questions, but on the surface, it would seem that way.
I think that there's a number of factors that are contributing to that. And I don't know, Rob and Marianne, if you want to speak to some of the practices in play. I think Marianne, you probably can talk, we had this conversation. The curriculum, the program that we're using is a tool, but I think that there's certain practices that are being embedded throughout this district that are also playing a significant role around that. I think is.
Absolutely, and I think that this is one point in the middle of the year, and so there are things that haven't been taught yet, so when we get to the end of the year, that is really important data for us to see how students continue to grow, but it also allows us to look at schools, at grades, and really dive in to see what levels of support are needed. I mean, you see some data that says, this grade, it's really interesting. Well, that's what our team does when we get this data. We look at what's bucking the trend, what school did really well in that grade, and then really having some conversations around that. We look at our curricula. Our math program, we have seen a lot of growth over the last couple of years. I think it also aligns to the national trend. I was reading an article that was talking about how math is making some monumental strides across the nation, where reading is slower to make those COVID gains, so to speak. So I think that that's one layer. I also think that our illustrative math program is it's a very scripted program that has a lot of components, but it's outlined, whereas our reading program, it has more variability because teachers are making some instructional decisions. And so as we look and we're building our standards-based practices, which is our focus for the year, this reading component is something that our team has been diving into throughout the year. I know in middle school in particular, we've added some units of study really just focused in on feedback that we've received and really to strengthen our reading program in middle school. Do you want to talk about IM?
Good evening. Well, I think Mr. Pennington pretty much covered it with the resource. But one thing that I would add is at this time of the year, so all of our schools establish school improvement plans, and that starts in the spring. We work with them throughout the summer, and all schools set two ELA goals. One is focused on achievement, and one is focused on accelerated growth for a subgroup. This is the time of year where Allison Brady Johnson and myself, we meet one-on-one with each principal to look at their data with them, to identify and to do that kind of analysis that you just heard Rob speak to. Are we seeing specific things in a grade or with a particular teacher team? And sometimes the district trends are not what you see at individual schools. So sometimes you could see a school where they've done extremely well in 5th grade or 6th grade, and so we actually need to focus our efforts somewhere else. Members of our team, after Allison and I conduct all of those mid-year conferences, members of the school team will all be coming together to continue looking at this data, to think about where do we need to deploy resources. Is it to particular schools, and to what level of support do they need? Because some schools just might need a little burst of support, whereas some schools might need some more intensive supports. So we're in the process of doing that data and really reflecting on where have our resources been very effective and where do we need to kind of deploy for the next couple of months.
Can you move to the final slide, Rob, please? Okay.
Actually, it's a celebration.
It's a celebration.
This is the celebration slide.
Can you continue pushing so that,
Okay.
So we see schools that have a high percentage of students, they had a gain fall to winter in the percent of students that were above the 60th percentile. And you see those schools listed in mathematics and also in reading. So they really, as Marianne said, I mean, we really see in both areas very good growth, although as a district we're seeing more in math.
To the superintendent's point, I mean, with the reading, like you said, some of the 4th graders in particular, these kids were learning their foundational reading online, basically, because that's when we were shut down. So I mean, that's gotta be it's challenging to learn to read, right?
even when you're in class. So now you have kids who are at home, learning to read. So it certainly seems to demonstrate that in some of the data. So, which also points to the importance of the coaches.
And the interventions, right. And I think, you know, in some schools, when you look at the number of students that require additional tiered interventions, one interventionist is not enough. We are operating on the minimal amount of support. Some schools like Kendall, for instance, would require 2 to 3 interventionists to effectively provide the full range of support that's required given the student body that is that is within the school. And we have a number of cases like this that the school would benefit from additional support to continue to exhibit gains. And despite that, Kendall was one of the schools highlighted for growth. So you can only imagine what could happen if the correct ratio was in every single school that needed the additional supports.
I just wanted to add one piece, because going back to Ashley's question around teacher feedback, when the district switched to AimsWeb, there was a lot of feedback around switching back to NWEA, and the correlation between in K through 8, how a student performs on NWEA correlating to how the student will perform on SBAC has been good data for our K-8 educators. I do think that if there was one other piece of feedback that they have mentioned, it is the amount of time it takes to test. So I just wanted to share that. That is some of the feedback that we have received.
And I think I concur with you, but standardized testing is just one metric of where our students are and what they're capable of doing. And they present the challenge that they don't really always assess the things that we want kids to know and be able to do, particularly now that as we continue to discuss the portrait of a graduate and what we want our scholars to know and be able to do by the time they leave us, the standardized assessments don't always align with what we want. So as we're thinking through the work ahead, we're thinking about what are the best tools that we can use to effectively assess where our students are at. But they don't always align with what the state says as requirements. So we have kind of a challenge at hand until they kind of catch up to how the world is changing. I think as a second component, we actually we will be inviting for March some of our school leaders to speak about some of their work that has led to the successes that we spoke about today in terms of the data. I want to talk a little bit about some of the work we're doing around our instructional program, particularly because as one of our asks this year within our budget is to acquire additional resources to provide more time for our elementary school teachers to plan. In going through that process, we want to make sure that we are effectively utilizing the personnel that we have and making sure that we're programming effectively to meet the diverse needs of our students, but also provide the release time that our teachers need to plan, to collaborate and work as a team. So Marianne and Allison are going to speak to the work that we're doing with New Solutions K-12.
Good evening, everyone. Allison Brady Johnson. So as Dr. Estrella just talked about some of the work that is happening around programming, we have partnered with New Solutions K-12, which is a consultant who works with school districts throughout the country and really supporting them with being able to maximize time in the classroom and in schools so that we are meeting the unique and individual needs of our school communities. So one of the things that they are currently doing is they are sort of assessing our current program. So when you think about the data that you just looked at and the instructional needs of our students, but also the work that we're doing around a portrait of a graduate and really making sure that our students are future ready. So between those two priorities, they will be looking at our district's programs in our schools to make sure that, one, we are using our time efficiently and maximizing that time, so that in the event that we do have to provide additional interventions, that we can figure out a way to create that time, but also looking at the courses that we're offering in the high schools to ensure that the courses really align with ensuring that our students are future ready. So part of the process in us doing this work together, like I said, they are doing an analysis of our current programs to see where we could be more efficient with our time. And that consists of also interviewing with principals and assistant principals. There's been a focus group that has been assembled as well. So they're really getting information on the ground from our school leaders and staff to make sure that as we move forward, that their voice is heard and that what they come up with really meets the needs of our schools. They're also interviewing district leaders around our various priorities and the work that has already happened. And again, they will make recommendations on how we can continue to refine our programs and find efficiencies in our current programming.
Just one thing that I would add is sometimes we think of programming or scheduling as a very technical thing, and there is a huge technical component to it, but there is a way to use your program and your schedule and the way you schedule your time to advance your vision and to meet your strategic priorities. But sometimes if we kind of just keep scheduling the way that we have in the past, and also, Allison spoke to the number of people that are being interviewed. Sometimes programming is kind of put on the shoulders of a very small team to do. But by interviewing all these different stakeholders, we're really trying to leverage the collective because different people have different experiences. And so we want to know what's working well, what hasn't been working for you, so that we can think about, starting to move towards a program or a schedule that will help us better accomplish our vision and strategic priorities. Are there any questions?
I think that having that many voices is great, and I think utilizing our time is super important. Where does a consultant like this fall into the budget conversation? Like, where does the money for that come from, or what umbrella does that fall under? Oh, just Lunar the B word.
I'm sure Allison had excellent answers. I just felt compelled.
I think Mr. Luna, you can speak a little bit about GFOA and some of the work that was happening there that led to our connection into this work.
So two things. I was actually introduced to this entity. I was a member of the Governance Finance Officers Association, and so we have a group of 100 school districts around the country where we get together, talk about best practices. And so I heard the work that he had been doing in other districts, efficiencies, how we can appropriately schedule. And it was around the time that the superintendent had indicated after the focus group with the teachers, how can we address release time for elementary school individuals. So after listening to him, I invited him to come to speak to the cabinet and some of the experts in the field. And I think we figured out that this was a partner that we needed, so the timing worked out perfectly. As far as the funding, we were actually fortunate that from the ESSER funds, there are ESSER funds that specifically speak to this. And so in working with Ms. Ferrois and looking at, I think there's a sliver last year, if you remember when we went through the budget, there's a sliver of ESSER that wasn't quite used, and this program fits with that, and so we were actually able to leverage grant funding to do this without impacting any of the tax dollars or any of the general fund budget.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any questions?
Yeah, I'm curious, you're talking about the interviews you're doing, the focus groups with principals and assistant principals. What other kinds of stakeholders are part of this conversation?
There are teachers who are part of this as well, so it's not just school leaders.
How are they, like, is it an opt-in, or they, how are they kind of identified?
They were identified by the school leaders.
And even prior to this, I met with cohorts of teachers to get a sense, particularly before we make a request for release time, of what would benefit them, how could they effectively utilize that time, what were some of the things that were inhibiting them from adequately supporting students, what were some of the things that we could do to help them do the work more effectively. And we had a really productive conversation with a number of cohorts of teachers. We made sure that the people that were in the conversation were teachers that were in the classroom, that had a full scope schedule, and people that had experience in different iterations of programming. So it was a pretty veteran group of folks that we met to get a sense of what was the need in the field and what were some of the things that we needed to take into consideration. We also have some admins that are really avid programmers that we brought into the conversation to help us think through, navigate, and kind of quantify the cost associated with potentially engaging in this work. And also thinking about what are some of the other things we need to think about K-12 to be more effective in the way we program, so that we can have additional resources coming in, given the tools that we already have in our possession. We didn't want to come forward and make a request without taking into consideration further assessing the bandwidth of the work that we have, K-12, and where we could build more strategic processes that will enable us to provide more services and time for staff.
Were specialist teachers included? Like not just classroom teachers, but music, art, counseling?
That was actually something I wanted to add on to Dr. Estrella's response. So with elementary school, we had classroom teachers as well as specialist teachers, and secondary core content versus non-core content, because different teachers experience the schedule in different ways, right, because of the way students are programmed. We also we have focus groups scheduled with school counselors as well, because they play a very key role in scheduling students for classes. Interventionists, people who are providing ML and special education services, because they experience the schedule in a very different way than a classroom or a core content teacher, so multiple roles.
So I just wanted to make sure that the board had an opportunity to understand some of the work that is going on, kind of behind the scenes, in preparation, in the hopes that we get the resources to do this work, but also just thinking long-term and larger scope. We want to make sure that even in the processes that we have in play now, that will be the most effective and efficient, and where we can find better ways of serving the needs of both student and teacher, that we have those opportunities. And this organization has the ability to give us ideas and perspective that we might not have locally, because they have such a global perspective, since they help districts across the nation, that will help us strengthen the capacity of programmers already in district, and help us program in places that we don't necessarily have programmers, think more strategically and effectively, particularly at the elementary school.
So it's a way to kind of just look at it, just examine efficiencies, weak strengths and weaknesses, kind of a.
Correct. And I think similarly to, we engaged in an efficiency study that looked at more of the operational aspects of the work that we do. This gives us an opportunity to deepen the work that we already started in collaboration with the city, and look at programmatically how can we better serve the need with the resources we have, and where can we maybe shift some things to make things more effective.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, as part of the superintendent report from active, March is early in April. We want to bring some leaders in. Actually, no, for the business meeting, we'll be able to bring in some leaders to speak to the practice and also some of the educators supporting the work, because I think it's very valuable for you as board members to see the faces in front of the work, and they can speak to what that experience is for them in practice. Next month, actually, our workshop is going to be our midpoint in March, end of February. It's going to be the mid-year review of all of our goals. So we will have the same fishbowl experience, given the feedback I received from the board during our last meeting, our last mid-year. It was well received to do the fishbowl because it allowed for a more intimate presentation, but also an opportunity to ask questions in greater depth of the work that's happening, and also look at every goal, every SMART goal, and where we are in terms of the progress we're making. So I think we have a lot of great things to celebrate and share, and we're really looking forward to when we return from break to presenting this work to the full board. And that concludes the superintendent report. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Estrella, and thank you for the detailed presentations. I think, sometimes people just think that decisions are made, off the cuff, but there's a lot of work that goes into these in a lot of detail, and thank you. Next item on the agenda, we're at the section of the agenda, action consent, where we vote on multiple items at once. However, if Dr. Estrella, on item A, approval of personnel, I know that there was a question, are these replacements, are we adding new positions? Can you speak a little bit on the positions?
Mr. Esmani, do you want to join me for that conversation? It depends on,
you don't have to go step by step.
Yeah, it depends on the month. Sometimes it's just replacement because we're filling a vacancy. That's what happens most of the time. In this case, where I'm asking for an amendment to the agenda for West Rock Middle School additional assistant principal, that is an add-on.
Not in the position.
It is a new position, because the size of the school has grown significantly, and there needs to be additional supports to fulfill the needs of that campus. So we're adding an administrator that we're grant funding right now to support the needs of that building. I know that there was concern from the community about supports for West Rock Middle School, and we wanted to make sure that they have the resources to really effectively support the campus that continues to grow. And if you're familiar with West Rock, the campus is complex because you have the main building, and because of the size of their population, they've had those mobile classrooms outside that add an additional supervision aspect, an additional element to supervise to that building that we also want to make sure we provide enough leadership to do the work. Anything you want to add?
No.
So the other positions, we do not need to go position by position, but the others on the personnel actions for our approval are all filling vacancies?
Correct.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I need a motion to approve to add Jules Duche as West Rocks Middle School's assistant principal. Kara, seconded by Janine, thank you. All right, before we do and vote on all of these items.
Sorry, Superintendent, the principal of West Rocks is.
I know, that's what I was trying to tell the
And so is Julie.
Yes.
I know. We have principal, Principal Adams here, and Mr. Jules Dujay. Principal Adams. Principal Reynolds, I'm sorry, Adam, I call you back.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So, can you share a few words of the candidate that you are presenting to the board for consideration?
Absolutely. Very excited. First, thank you, Dr. Estrella, members of the cabinet and the board for having me tonight. I am super excited to be able to introduce hopefully the newest member of the West Rocks family, our new assistant principal. You heard the name, Mr. Jules Dujay. He's going to join hopefully me and Mrs. Amaral as part of our leadership team. He has been a social worker for 6 years at Kendall College and Career Academy. He has an extensive background in social work and social emotional learning. Prior to Kendall, he actually spent his time at the Yale Child Study Center, which he learned and grew. He has been part of the instructional leadership team at Kendall for the last few years. He is the member of the PDEC committee, the district-wide committee for teachers and evaluation. He pioneered the attendance committee with Dr. Baker over at Kendall, focusing on reducing chronic absenteeism. He is focused on building relationships among students, staff, families. Really, his strengths and experience match the needs of our school community, and I couldn't be more excited and to have him join us. But I'd like to introduce Mr. Jules Dujay.
Thank you, Principal Reynolds. Mr. Dujay, we'll ask you to join in a second, but I think I'll turn it back to the chair to pass the motion first.
Okay, I'm going to separate approval of personnel from the action consent. All in favor to approve Jules Dujay as West Rocks Middle School Assistant Principal, please raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. Welcome aboard.
Mr. Dujay.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank the board, the members of the cabinet, and Dr. Estrella for bringing SEL to our district, supporting it, and most importantly, making it matter. Before I get into any particulars, le deseo unas buenas noches a mis familias latinas. Es un orgullo para mí como latino estar aquí con ustedes y estoy muy contento de los próximos pasos en este nuevo camino. I want to first start by saying that leaving Kendall will be very difficult because I made more than a family there. So many teams, so many people to really think about. But I think about my students who I've worked with for the last 6 years and watching them grow and graduate, to my families that I'm going to miss very much, and to Dr. Baker, who, you know, is more to me than just a regular principal. She was a mentor. She was a woman who always led me to think about love and the passion first. So thank you for giving me that space. I want to also let West Rocks know that the kind of person that you're getting is a person who shows up first and leaves last. I try to lead by example. I don't do any magic tricks. All I do is love the students as much as I can. And I believe that this love is what pours out and makes cultures different. I believe that this is the love that will make change, not only for attendance, but for the positive culture and adding to already an exceptional team. I've always looked to Beth and to Dr. Reynolds for mentorship throughout, and I'm very fortunate to already be joining a dynamic team. I always tell my students that, you know, you're gonna hit bumps in the road, but there is one opportunity that shows up. You get that one chance and you take advantage of that chance. And that chance has now become available to a public student who grew up in New York and now is a Connecticut resident. I'm excited and super proud. I'm gonna lead by empathy, by hard work, by grittiness, by love, And most of all, for any who don't remember why, just let them know he's just a social worker. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, before we continue on the action consent vote, any questions, comments, or corrections on the minutes? Mary Ellen?
Do you have
I
some?
was just gonna note that I wasn't included in the attendance, and I was at that meeting. When I looked at everybody who was there, I was there, so I just want to make that correction.
Sherry McCready Pritchard has to be added to the meeting, to the attendance. Mary Ellen?
A confession, I don't always read all the minutes, but I did last time, and there are several corrections I like to see. One is under public participation. There's in the second paragraph, it starts, she said Mr. T played a vital role and is without a doubt the word is collect is there, it must mean good principle, but that's word is misplaced. Then going down to finance, SBB process, first paragraph, second sentence, it says school leaders and it needs to say school leaders. On the last page, under future ready programs, 1 to 3rd paragraph, it says, Ms. Carpio said she is misspelled, it must mean attended. It says A-T-T-A-N-E-D, and that needs to be changed to A-T-T-E-N, attended. E-D. And lastly, the very last paragraph, it says my name, Ms. Flaherty, and it says Murphy. So that was a surprise to me. Flaherty Ludwig is my last name. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I believe there is.
My first name is misspelled in the attendance, very minor, but it's A-S-H-L-E-Y.
So Ashley Gouillon's name, correction and attendance. Any other corrections on the minutes? Are we good to go? Okay. So motion to approve the approval of personnel, approval of budget transfers, approval of trips, and approval of minutes. Collins, seconded by Sherry, all in favor? Please say aye, raise your hand. Unanimous, thank you. Next action items. We're going to vote on approval of 2024-2025 program of studies, approval of Series 1000 non-discrimination community policy, approval of Series 4000 family and medical leave FMLA policy, approval of Series 4000 non-discrimination employees policy, and approval of Series 5000 non-discrimination students policy. Before I ask for a motion, Ralph, can you please speak a little bit about the procedures of how policies, we review them? It's not like we just created these, we were reviewing them for years now, trying to update them and be up to par.
Yeah, so really these and especially the policies that you're seeing now, these are ones we reviewed in December. For the most part, a lot of the year we spend actually looking at policies that already are in existence in our model policies and making sure that they're kept up to date, because in the past years, they never really were. And we just kept adding policies instead of actually just revising them, so.
I think that for the sake of the new board members, it's important to know that there was a time when many of our policies were out of date and we were out of compliance. So one of the things that we did was actually thanks to our attorneys, Shipman Goodman and team, they had model policies that we could fully adopt. So instead of going item by item and trying to update, which would have always kept us behind schedule, we adopted their full policy book. And then from that, Ralph has done an incredible job with the policy committee to then infuse certain policies and make modifications based on practices that we had already in place in the district. And that's part of the work that has been happening now for, I think, way over a year, like you said.
Definitely. And these new policies that you're seeing tonight, the non-discrimination ones, we try to lump them together because really the only changes in those was the definition of non-discrimination. So they added in a more detailed definition of what bias is and so forth. So we discuss those and we actually make those adjustments so that we're actually in compliance with the law. And it was the same thing with FMLA. We have an FMLA policy, but there were just some I think, minor changes. And forgive me, I just don't remember, Louis would actually remember the specific little changes, but there were some minor changes and stuff in the way we define it. And I don't know if it was intermittent leave, there was a couple different things that we had to make sure that were kind of covered. So that's really what those updates were. We do have, when we do have new policies, so like a good example would be this coming week, we will be having a policy committee and we'll be reviewing some older policies that need to be updated. But we're looking at an AI policy right now to be put into place. So that is actually a brand new policy, but along with that, we have 3 policies that'll be on there that exist that need to be updated so that they're in compliance. One is like our student discipline policy. There needs to be language in there if a student's using AI and how that relates to potentially, a disciplinary action at different times. So those are the kinds of things we'll be discussing. So we do keep them up to date. Usually every year we have 1 or 2 policies that are being added in. Obviously AI, we talked about the grading policy earlier too. So those are just some examples of that. But yeah, keeping them up to date really is important.
Yes, I would say, being on the policy committee, the eye-opening part to me was how much input the state has for us. They generate the bulk of our policies, and we need to just keep up to date with what they're saying, including expanded definitions as we had with harassment and discrimination on this particular set.
Yeah, and federal policy too. It's a mix of both, yes.
Federal policy, so it's that kind of weaving in between federal, state, and then what we had a long time ago. So that's makes it quite fascinating.
Yeah, no, and I got to give kudos to Louis Bray and as well as
Yes.
Shipman and Goodwin for helping us to kind of keep on top of this.
And every August, you'll see towards the end, usually probably more September, right, Tom? We get new policies from the state or legislation from the state that we have to then amend our policies. So this is a continuous cycle that every year we will embrace.
It's actually the only committee that actually goes through the summer. Constantly trying to keep on top of it.
Yeah, a lot of laws passed July 1st, so.
Any other questions? All right. So motion to approve A through E in actions of all the policies that we just discussed. Mary Ellen, seconded by Howard, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Next item is our monthly financial report. Linda, you're up.
Did we approve the program of study?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, we did one.
She did A through.
Did it pay for
Oh. Yes, sir.
Did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to make sure I missed it.
No, thank you.
All right, good evening again. So you have the detailed financials in the packet. And so this is financials as of January. We are 58% of the year through. And as you can see from the budget, we're about 53% of the budget, which is kind of consistent with where we would be this year. I will talk about 3 areas that are kind of outliers. You'll see property services, we are at about 64% budget, whereas we are only 58% through the year. Other services is at 79, and so I just kind of want to highlight those 2. So the first one, purchased property, if you look in your detail line, it's line 400 in the line object level detail. That covers primarily our custodial contract with Affinico. That contract annually this year increased 4%, which is what the contractual increase. But if you recall, we've also added new space in our buildings. We have a bigger footprint with some of the newer construction. So we're also seeing some increases there. So that's really what's driving those purchase services. And then the other area that you see an increase is the other services line, where we are at about 17 million, almost 80% of the budget. And this is one item that I've been sharing with you throughout the year. The first one is object 563, which is out-of-district tuition. And so you do a series of transfers throughout the year. As you know, this is a conversation we had last budget year. The approved budget for out-of-district tuition this year was only 9.2 million. So far, we are anticipating spending close to 11 million in out-of-district tuition, way higher than what the budget was approved. Our goal is to try and use existing resources and continue to transfer without going back to the city for special appropriation. But that's one outlier that's driving that change. And then the other one that goes with that is transportation. Transportation for our regular education students, and then our transportation for our special education students for out of district. Our transportation contract will increase about 5%. We have two main providers. But then we're also seeing an increase in transporting out of district tuition. So those are the items that are kind of outliers in the budget. But so far, overall, we're at 53%. We think that we can get through the budget without any transfers, without any special appropriation by doing internal transfers from other budgets. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So you said you're already up to 11 for special ed, right? You said we budgeted 9, we're already up to 11?
Yes, we anticipate that by the end of the year, we will spend close to $11 million.
Not now.
We're not there yet. We're not quite at 9. I think we're at 7 so far. We'll be at 11 by the end of the year, just based on who we have and the tuition.
Linda, could you unpack a little bit of how you're just saying you don't want to ask for another appropriation, and so you're going to look back at other things that we may have an excess here or there? Could you just unpack that a little bit?
Yes, so for an example, you just approved some transfers. We have areas, for example, where we have vacancies in staff and turnover. So for positions that that aren't filled, so any monies that we don't spend in that area, we transfer over to this line. Even though at the beginning of the budget, we do estimate for turnover, and we actually don't budget to the full amount because we take into account turnover. So this is turnover in addition to what we have projected. But there is turnover that we factor into the budget, and we deduct that from our total percent of expenses.
So that's one source.
That's one source. And then, there are some others here and there. We leverage grants. If we receive a grant, I think last year was an example where we had something identified in the local budget. We got a grant for it, so we didn't need to use the local dollars. And so that's another source that we apply towards these grants. There are some things we are able to prepay if that's a possibility. So there are a number of options that we have to do that, but it does get us pretty close. But what that impact is, by state law, we are allowed to carry over 2% next year. So what we're doing essentially is we're using that throughout the year. So by the time we get to the end of the year, you'll recall last year we only carried over about 100,000. I anticipate that's probably going to be the case this year as well. So any monies that would have been carried over to offset next year's budget, we're using those to offset this year's budget.
Thank you.
Are out-of-district students that are just students here in Connecticut, or we do have students that are in the New York area as well?
Mr. Pennington has an excellent answer. No pressure.
Out-of-district students are students that reside in Norwalk but go to school out of Norwalk Public Schools. So they could go to school in New York, they could go to school upstate Connecticut. There's different state-approved programs, but they are residents of Norwalk.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but I just wanted to know, do we have any that's in the New York area?
We do.
Yes. So that's where that transportation along, even in Connecticut, that's where that transportation will become a big issue.
Sometimes, if we're looking at New York, it's most likely a residential program where the student would stay there, so there would not be transportation. But the cost is,
yes,
is additive.
Thank you.
That was an excellent answer. Any other questions for Rob? Thank you. Thank you. All right, next item, committee representative reports. Any chairs that have any reports?
I have a library liaison report.
Okay.
I've been in touch with Vicki Otis, who's the Director of Youth Library Services. She shared that this past weekend, February 3rd and 4th, was Take Your Child to the Library Day. And children visiting the library were invited to make hearts for their paper quilt. In addition to that, students at Merrimack and Tracy are making those paper hearts at school, which will then be on the quilt that is going to be unveiled at the library on February 14th and will hang there for the rest of the year. The library has a lot of programs planned for the week of February break. There'll be a calendar coming out, but there are special craft programs on Tuesday and Wednesday of that week and Winter Games Day on Thursday. And Vicki wanted me to be sure everyone's aware, every child in Norwalk Public Schools has a library card that just needs to be activated. I've done it with my own child, it was very easy, and now my kiddo is very proud to check out books with her own library card. And Vicki's working on a new video explaining how the cards work, and once I have that, I will do my best to help get that out to everyone.
Thank you.
I'd like to say that the Board of Ed Finance Committee had a second joint meeting with the city's Common Council Finance Committee. It was another impactful, fruitful, I'd say, meeting. And we hope to continue having conversations with the city with the budget going forward.
Last Friday night, I was able to attend a great atmosphere at Bryant Command between Bryant Command and Norwalk High. The game was outstanding, the atmosphere was outstanding. Both athletic directors did an excellent job controlling the student body, making sure everything was intact. The fact that, tickets are not being sold at the door anymore and online helps out from the capacity standpoint, but it was a great atmosphere. So I, commend Norwalk High coming back to win that game at the end. Double overtime. Great atmosphere, so great to both of those schools.
Yes, I heard that was a sold out game.
Yeah.
That game is intense when it comes.
Wow. Yeah, we got the Thanksgiving Day game was intense.
Yeah, Thanksgiving Day game was very
That's
intense.
awesome to hear.
I have a report from the curriculum committee. That we're looking at this program of study, but I'd like to take out one thing in particular. They set up a program as a kind of a first step to something that I think could be just incredible. This would be 11th graders at Brian McMahon in marine biology pathway. That they will, if I'm saying this right, I hope, they will be working with middle school students and maybe even Jefferson Elementary School students and helping them with the marine biology that they know. So they'll be mentoring younger students. And why it is so sparkly in my eyes is that it's a first step towards creating a pathway for young people who might want to become teachers so that we might have an education pathway. And just a little reflection on my part, being a teacher for 4 decades, one very common question I'd ask when, at cafeteria or you're just sitting around having coffee was, when did you want to become a teacher? And it would really be, you either knew when you were in fourth grade or you graduated from college and you didn't know. And so that I found, it was like 50-50. I was one that finished college and then I found my direction. But half of the teachers know already by the time they're in first, second grade.
I knew when I was 4 years old.
There you go.
Teachers.
Okay, so
On the
you're
other end.
half and I'm the other half.
How about you, Colin?
I still don't know.
Okay, we won't, an outlier. So I'm very excited for those that know that they could have a pathway to a dream job from my point of view. It certainly has made my dreams come true. So very excited about that.
I have an update on the facility side of things. So we had a meeting a week and a half ago with the city, Alan Lowe, Senator Nutt was there, Diana and I attended, and got an update on the new Norwalk High School P-TECH project, which is moving along. They have been receiving bids from the trades, and happy to say that all the bids that have been coming in so far have all been within our budget so far. So they're continuing to work through them and fine tune things and, eventually pick the contractors that were working on the project. And it's currently looking like the groundbreaking will be probably, hopefully, middle of April. When the ground walks. So it's on track, so that's good news.
I just wanted to say, even though I think everybody's left and it's not meant to be interactive, but on behalf of the Personnel Committee, I do want to say for the record that we thank and appreciate the folks that came out and spoke tonight. We hear their passion, we appreciate it, and especially the young people did a very good job. So just for the record.
Yes.
Okay. Next item is board member announcements. This is where we get to share any personal event information to the public, or the public can get to know us a little bit better personally. I don't have anything new to tell right now. Anyone?
I have something coming up on Friday night. It's either the third or fourth year, I can't remember, that I will be volunteering at the Night to Shine event at the Grace Farms up in New Canaan. And those of you that don't know, this is the Tim Tebow Foundation, and it's basically prom for kids with disabilities. This year is no exception. It was sold out pretty much immediately, so I think it's about 150, 160 kids that will be coming. And I'll be part of the greeter team, so helping to get our guests from their cars and into the venue safely. It's a really amazing event. I think across the globe, I think they said there's like almost 100 of these events all on this night, coming Friday night. So you might be seeing stuff on social media about it, but it's called Night to Shine, and it's a really special night.
Well, thank you, everyone. Now, we'll be going into executive session. We will be doing discussion of privilege attorney-client communication regarding procedures for investigation of employee misconduct proposed for executive session this evening. Motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Sherry, seconded by Ashley. We shall return, and that's it for now.
Yeah, so, Vincente interpretation rooms, you guys can shut down for now. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. You are live.
Okay, thank you, Roland. Good evening, everyone. We are back from executive session. I wanted to thank the legal team this evening. And with that being said, thank you to my colleagues. It's been a very, very long day and evening. And I would like a motion to adjourn. Mary Ellen, seconded by Ashley. All in favor? Good night.
Good night.